Hi everyone, this is Cody from Pages of Pictures again, and I just want to talk a little bit more in depth about some of the usages of the rule of thirds as far as how I've incorporated them into my photos. I've got up here on screen a couple of my photos that I've taken over the past year or so with the rule of thirds grid laid over the top of them. I'll start with this one up in the top left hand corner, and it's just a silhouette shot of my wife sitting on top of our car up in near Spyglass Ridge in Orchard Mesa. I took this photo just after sunset, as you can see in the background. I was using a tripod, and I set her over on the left-hand side and utilized the rule of thirds here, actually, I think, quite well in order to extend the photo out to the right-hand side so that the viewers could really get a good look at the sunset and the background and the way that the clouds look with the light behind them, not just the silhouette of my wife, but also the sky itself. You can see the skyline falls right directly along this bottom horizontal rule of thirds, and then the main portion of the subject being over on the left-hand side, not quite on the lines themselves, but really close, still making use of the rule of thirds. Now, this bottom right-hand example here is sort of an example to the contrary, I guess, if you will, saying, you know, this is kind of showing you that it doesn't always have to be perfect, that the rule of thirds isn't in fact a rule that's set in stone. It can just be more of a guideline that you utilize to try to add composition to your photos. Now, this one is not necessarily the best representation of the rule of thirds because although a good majority of the content falls along these lines and the diagram and the grid here, it kind of just takes up a majority of the photo, so it's not exactly the best time to use the rule of thirds just because the subject is such a large portion of the photo, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in some of the later examples where I look at some macro shots that I've done as well. This photo of Mount Garfield here, while it's not a bad photo, it's actually a quite nice photo, just doesn't really make perfect usage of the rule of thirds, as I mentioned before. You do have the vertical lines here that sort of work with the skyline and some of the clouds, but for the most part it's just kind of up there right in your face, almost centered. So it's just sort of something I wanted to show you guys to give you sort of an example, as I said before, to the contrary, that says while the rule of thirds does work really well and can add a lot to your composition, it is just a guideline and doesn't always have to be strictly adhered to. Some of these next photos that we're looking at here, starting with this shot of this little plant. I'm not really sure what exactly it is. I just kind of took some up-close shots with a macro lens to give some examples of how to utilize the rule of thirds here. Now, this one doesn't have the grid, so it's not as easy to visualize, or it's not as easy to see rather, but try to visualize the grid over top and see that I've placed the two twigs, or the two sticks with the little stuff coming up off of them, the little flowers blooming, if you will, on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, as opposed to centering them both pointing towards each other, utilizing the grid, if you can kind of imagine it, over the top to lead your eye from this first one that's really up close here over to the second one and then down. The next example is another macro shot of some dandelions that I took in the same park, and actually this one on the right-hand side here, this big one, is typically where you might think your eye is going to go to first because it's so close, but actually I focused the camera specifically on the one behind back here on the left and placed it over on the left hand side near where the intersection would be for the left hand vertical line and the left hand horizontal line. You can see here that's where I wanted the viewer's eye to go first, and then allow the stem almost, if you will, to lead down to the bottom right hand third of the photo to where you can see this as well. So it's a good usage of the rule of thirds, but again, another type of photo where had I had this dandelion in the back a little bit more centered, I don't think that it would have necessarily taken away too much from the composition of the photo, unless there was something that came into view over here behind the dandelion that you didn't want to include in the photo. So that one would have been okay moving it around a little bit, but I liked the way that this one came out with having the two dandelions sitting directly on the top left and bottom right intersections of the rule of thirds. And lastly, we will look at, oh, better hurry. We're looking at some parking meters down on Main Street, and these are set up just kind of to give you an idea of the depth of the photo, and it's a nice usage of the rule of thirds because it's a perfect logical progression of where your eye wants to go. I love the way that I was able to set this front parking meter on the right hand vertical line and then allow these subsequent parking meters that move back into the background of the photo to move along the middle lines of the bottom horizontal line where it would be here, leading your eye directly into the back of the photo. So those are some more examples, some personal examples of photos that I've shot that just kind of are designed to show you guys how to implement the rule of thirds into your photography, to utilize that to improve the composition all around. And not only that, but to also know that it is just a guideline. I can't stress that enough. It's just a guideline, and it doesn't always have to be strictly adhered to. So move your camera around and find the perfect shot, no matter what that means. If it's utilizing the rule of thirds, the golden spiral, laying down upside down, whatever you have to do, do that to get the best shot. So thanks for listening, and this has been Cody from Pages of Pictures.